Hola, en esta lección vamos a aprender sobre los objetos indirectos y los pronombres de objeto indirecto. We're going to be learning about indirect objects and indirect object pronouns. First of all, going back to direct objects, you learned previously that a direct object is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of the verb directly. In contrast, an indirect object or an indirect object pronoun receive the action of the verb indirectly, and you'll see this through examples. Note the following example. Roberto le presta 100 pesos a Luisa. Roberto lends 100 pesos to Luisa. An indirect object and an indirect object pronoun answer the question to whom or for whom in a sentence. So, for example, in your previous sentence, Roberto lends 100 pesos to Luisa. The question would have been, ¿A quién le presta Roberto 100 pesos? Who does Roberto lend 100 pesos to? Or to whom does Roberto lend 100 pesos? He lends 100 pesos to Luisa. So Luisa is your indirect object and le is your indirect object pronoun. Here's your list of indirect object pronouns. Me, which means to or for me. Te, to or for you in the familiar. Le, to or for him or her, or to or for you in the formal. Nos, to or for us. In Spain, os means to or for you in the familiar plural. And les means to or for them, or to or for you in the plural in Latin America, or in the formal plural in Spain. Atención. The forms of indirect object pronouns for first and second person, me, te, nos, and os, are the same as direct object pronouns. So they are very easily confused once you get to le and les, and lo, la, los, and las. Indirect object pronouns agree in number, but they do not agree in gender, unlike lo, la, los, and las, which agreed in gender and in number. Using an indirect object pronoun. Spanish speakers commonly use both an indirect object pronoun and the noun to which it refers in the same sentence. The reason why they do this is to clarify to whom this pronoun refers. So if we say le, we typically will say who that le is to make it clear, because le can mean to him, it can mean to her, it can mean to you. So to clarify it, we tend to use their name. So for example, ella le vende la ropa a Elena. She sells clothes to Elena. Les prestamos el dinero a Inés y Alex. We lend money to Inés and Alex. So in the first sentence, le is Elena. If I were to just say, Elena le vende la ropa, you would not know who le is. She sells the clothes to him, to her, to you. Which one is it? If I say a Elena, it makes it clear that it is Elena. Same thing with the second example. Les could be to them, girls, to them guys. It could be to you, plural, to y'all. But if we say Inés y Alex, that makes it clear that les is just those two people. Indirect object pronouns are also used without the indirect object noun when the person for whom the action is being done is known. For example, Ana le presta la falda a Elena. Ana lends her skirt to Elena. Here we have le and we have Elena. Elena refers to le. Ana lends the skirt to her, to Elena. See, we don't do this in English. We either say to her or we say to Elena, but we don't say to her and to Elena in the same sentence. In Spanish, we do. También le presta unos blue jeans. Now, we already know that we're talking about Elena, so we don't need to keep repeating her name. She also lends some blue jeans to her, okay? Or she lends her some blue jeans. So we know le is Elena because we've already mentioned it in the previous sentence. Indirect object pronouns are usually placed before the conjugated form of the verb. In English, they go after. Martín me compra un regalo. Martín buys me a gift. You have to think of it, Martín, for me, buys a gift. That's the structure that Spanish goes in. In a negative sentence, the pronoun is placed between the no and the conjugated verb. Eva no me escribe cartas. Eva does not write me letters. Or you can also say Eva doesn't write letters to me. But you have to say Eva doesn't to me write letters. That's the way Spanish is structured. And that's why this structure tends to be a little harder to say and to understand, because the order is different. So you have to hear it a lot, you have to use it a lot, you have to practice it a lot for it to become second nature. When a conjugated verb is followed by an infinitive or the present progressive, the indirect object pronoun may be placed before the conjugated verb, so before the first verb, or attached to the infinitive or present participle or the second verb. So when you have two verbs, whether it's verb infinitive or verb like estar plus ando and yendo, you have two places that you can put the pronoun. You get to choose. And there's no one way that's correct. They're both used. Okay, let's take a look at some examples. Él no quiere pagarte versus él no te quiere pagar. You have two verbs, quiere and pagar. So since you have two verbs, you have a choice on where you can place te. It can go after the second verb attached to the end, or it can go before the first verb, not attached to anything. Both are correct. They both mean exactly the same thing. Here's an example with present progressive. Él está escribiéndole una postal a ella. Él le está escribiendo una postal a ella. They both mean he is writing a postcard to her. What's a postcard? No, I'm kidding. Le can go before está, which is your first verb, or it can go after escribiendo, which is the second verb. Now, one thing that I need to mention is when you attach a pronoun to the end of an ando or yendo, you always put an accent on the E in yendo and the A in ando. That's just to maintain the pronunciation in that syllable. So again, with two verbs, you can put the pronoun before the first verb or after the second verb. Either way is fine. When an indirect object pronoun is attached to a present participle, as I mentioned, an accent mark is added to maintain the stress. Escribiéndole. Because the indirect object pronouns le and les have multiple meanings, Spanish speakers often clarify to whom the pronouns refer with the preposition a plus the pronoun or a plus the noun. Okay, for example, yo le compro un abrigo. What does this mean? I buy a coat for her, for him, for you. We don't know. But if I say a él, a ella, a usted, a Juan, a Luisa, if I add that, then it makes it clear who le is. Ella le describe un libro. She's describing a book to him, to her, to you. We don't know. But if we say a Juan, that makes it clear. That's why we call it a clarifier. It clarifies who le is. We know who le is. Él les vende unos sombreros. Okay, he sells some hats to them, to you all, to them girls. We don't know. So we attach a plus the people to make it clear. A ellos, a ellas, a ustedes, a Juan y a Luisa. Ellos les hablan muy claro. Who is les? We don't know. So if I say a los clientes, to the customers, now we know who les is. It makes it absolutely clear. Okay, just understand that in Spanish, since it is a different language, sometimes they say things in a different word order, and they do things in Spanish that we don't do in English. Like we would not say in English, they speak to them very clearly to the customers. We either say to them or we say to the customers, but we don't say both. Okay, so that concludes this lesson on indirect object pronouns. Let's do some practice.